Hi everyone, my name is Lindsay Buzan and I'm an admission counselor at St. Michael's College in Vermont. I'll be taking you through the virtual version of our essay workshop and I'm super excited. Thank you so much for bearing with us and VSAC as well and having to transform kind of our program from an in-person model to an online/virtual one. So I hope even though that we're not in person that you will still get as much out of this as you would in an in-person. At the end of the slideshow, which I'll be presenting in a few minutes, I also leave my contact information. So if you have direct questions related to where I was going with certain points or were curious and wanting to learn more about advice or expertise in relation to essay writing, I'd be happy to share those with you. So I'm going to share my screen now and switch to the presentation style. Thank you so much. So first I wanted to start off with an agenda for what we'll be learning today as we're coming together in this virtual session. I think it's really important to remain goal-oriented and centered for why we're running through this workshop. So the first piece of the puzzle that I'll be running through are learning objectives. So what I hope you walk away with, some tangible outcomes, things like that. Also, the next thing that we'll discuss is why it's important to write a good college essay. How might that affect your college application as a whole? The next piece are characteristics of a good essay. So essay writing can be highly subjective, but there are uniform ways out there that folks can measure what makes a quote unquote good essay or what makes a successful college essay. So I have a bit of information about that. And then there's kind of a slightly longer piece to this on which I'll go through and analyze a college essay as well. I've picked out an essay written by a local student actually who did very well on her college essay this year and received one of her highest ratings in the St. Michael's evaluation process for that. And then just to leave you, I thought it would be helpful for to kind of leave you with a bang for how to brainstorm ideas and also offer up some guiding questions that could help inform your own thoughts and project and policies around how you might write an effective essay as you're thinking of what topics to write about. So the first is learning objectives. So the first part of my presentation is a goal of wanting to understand why a strong college essay is so important. The next piece from my presentation, hopefully you'll come away with, is how to distinguish a college essay, a strong college essay. Next, we'll go through analyzing parts of the college essay, as I mentioned before in the agenda, and then we'll also evaluate potential subjects that might be topics for solid college essay by using this guided framework that I'll walk you through as well. So a lot of colleges and universities will use the term holistic application review process. It's a tongue twister when they will review how and why they are evaluating a college application in a certain way. And so this term is used kind of as an umbrella because it will cover a lot of different facets, but generally speaking for St. Mike's, this is how we would evaluate. So first is transcripts. So we'll look to see how you're doing academically, how you're challenging yourself, are you taking those challenging AP and IB courses, how well you're doing in those, how well you're doing in the classes is usually known as strength of curriculum. Next is we're test optional. So some schools might require test scores, or for certain majors, you might have to submit your test scores. But for us, we are test optional, as are over 800 colleges nationwide. The third piece of our holistic application review process are letters of recommendation. And these are kind of second person observations from who you are. So it's not necessarily a first person, which is what the essay would indicate to us, but it's more in terms of what others think about you and how well you're thought of in your school and community. The next is co-curricular involvement. And so we don't call co-curricular involvement at St. Mike's extracurricular involvement. We call it co-curricular because we believe what students are doing outside the classroom is equally as important as how they're performing inside the classroom. So co-curricular involvement gives us an indication of where your passions lie and what you'll ultimately bring to campus when you get here. And then there's also the Common App in general, or the application platform that you use to apply to colleges. And this will give us an indication of your family structure that could be traditional or non-traditional, citizenship status, languages spoken in the home, if you're a first-generation student, for example. And all of these are indicators to us about your journey through your academic experience. And then last piece that is about your essay. So your essay, although it's just a 650 word document that is a subject that's important to you, usually about how you've overcome some sort of facet of adversity or expanding on one of your passions you might have mentioned in your co-curricular involvement, your essay also indicates to us a lot of information about you. So from how you conduct yourself to how you articulate your thoughts, your level of self-awareness or self-knowing. It's also a first-person observation of who you are, and it's written in your own words. So this is way different than the rest of the whole application because it really gives us insight into, again, that level of self-knowing and who you are, what you're about, and all of that is indicated through the written portion of the essay. So I don't want you to stress about that, but it's definitely a unique aspect and something that I personally do look at intensely when I evaluate applications. So characteristics of a good essay. And I'm looking at myself in this little video box here, and I'm just going to move myself slightly because I don't know if I'm cutting this off in the actual screen as I'm presenting to you. But hopefully you can read everything. The title says characteristics of a good essay. So I just wanted to take a moment to define the term subjectivity because through the holistic application review process, more than one person might look at your application. And so more than one person might evaluate your essay. And given that we all come from our own set of experiences, that does influence how we define the quality of a college essay. Given that everyone is coming from different walks of life and different sets of experiences, we still have to build uniformity for how we're measuring this information that we're getting from an essay. And so we build uniformity by being trained and aware of unconscious biases that might come out to play, or also kind of ways in which we can structure the measurement of a quality essay. And so we might measure essays in different ways, but for one example is a rubric. So if we have a rubric, we kind of have this, this leveled numeric system in which we can kind of decide what gets a number of a 5, if 5 is the top for a quality essay. Might that include grammar, style of writing, clarity, flow, things like that. And so if you look down further in my in this slide, you can see those points of evaluation that I just mentioned. But another way that we might measure success in an essay comes from comparing with standardized tests. So we might look if you have taken AP Comp and see what that score was and how, if we find it consistent with what we might score your essay according to our own rubric. We might also look at SAT and ACT writing if that's submitted, because we are test optional. But if it is submitted, then we would consider it as part of the whole application process. And so what does that look like in terms of comparing our writing sample to what was written on the spot in one of these standardized tests? So that is definitely taken into consideration if it is submitted to us. So I just want to drop down and kind of give more detail about points of evaluation. And I wrote out some questions to think about, and this will kind of be used also a reference later in the guide that I also provided. So the first point is grammar. Does the writing follow prescriptive or at least widely accepted grammar rules? So do you capitalize the first letter of every word of every sentence? Do you use punctuation correctly? Like these basic grammar rules that you have been learned in school. Is the grammar that you're using in your essay support those prescriptive grammar rules, or at least the ones that are widely accepted for native English speakers? Then there's also another point of evaluation that one might look at called style of writing. So is your essay mechanical, which means that it might have a beginning, middle, and end, but the transitions might not be necessarily very strong. And so this is kind of where the subjective piece comes into play a little bit. But we're ultimately, for style of writing, we're looking for a writing level that's mature enough where the student is able to develop his or her unique voice. And it doesn't sound like another student's essay. We can tell the difference. So there's a level of maturity there. Next, from clarity, this question is kind of synonymous with what the meaning of clarity is. Does the essay make sense? Do we have to look for meaning, or is there a gap in information that ultimately leads to the reader feeling confused or left like something's unresolved from what we've read? That's something that we also look for in essays. And also, again, flow, like I mentioned before. Does your writing have a beginning, middle, of end? I know that we kind of learn in middle school this kind of like upside, this triangle of events where there's like the beginning and then the rising action, and the highest point of the triangle is the climax, and then which is the turning point, and then it ultimately comes down to some sort of resolution. So if you write a story and you use a personal essay as a narrative, then we do encourage that type of flow. And regardless of whatever you decide to write about, something that is characteristic of a good essay is that it enhances your personal brand. So as you're working on your application, whether that's the Common App or the essay or co-curricular involvement or transcripts or even like letters of recommendation, what people are talking about you and how you're presenting yourself, there might be certain elements that you want to come across as more salient than others. And so with that, we want your essay to kind of like support your own personal brand and the person you want to be presented as. So make sure that both the subject that you're writing about and the way you write about it enhances and complements your personal brand. So I'm going to read this, and this is an example of a college essay that we rated as a 5, and a 5 is the highest level of a college essay that we give out. So you can kind of see my eyes are going either direction because I am moving my box a little bit so that I can fully read this. So please excuse that if you can see this in the shared screen mode. But I'll read this essay, and then I'll I kind of took notes, and I'll go over what really stood out to me in this essay. And then we'll go through the guide and questions to help you kind of formulate your own essay. So the college essay starts, I actually was not home when the monster came. My dusty Toyota Camry, Cam, and I were making the winding journey home from work. When the sky started crying, I shrugged, and Cam wiped the tears from my windshield. The drops hardened to ice and pelleted whirled from the sky to settle in a thick film. Isolated inside, listening to the grainy radio, I barely registered the stomp of the monster. Living in the Northeast, I have slid along my share of icy roads, pushing through the stormy breath to emerge unscathed. Cam has snow tires, but without me, without my drive and stubborn persistence, neither of us would survive the long winters. I have seen worse monsters, and through screaming warning signals and terrifying skids, I have driven on. As we sped closer and closer to home, the path of the monster's tail was evident in the debris littering the damp asphalt. Spindly twigs socialized with leafy beams in my path. Patches of acorns crunched under Cam's tires, and sticky leaves built up under her wipers. We turned on the light where the deep shadow of the monster fell upon us. Through the windshield, I searched for the flash of a stormy eye, eagerly anticipating the roar of thunder that follows. But this monster was different. It lacked sharp claws, a deceiving reassurance of tranquility. When I arrived home, it became apparent that the monster had reached destruction. The rough metal contraption we had over the beach had always seemed an intrusion upon the beauty of the golden sand. With a casual breath, the monster tossed the awning into the yard, nearly striking my parents. After the monster glided away, chuckling, all that remained were metal bones scattered across the yard. As a child, I started to see my problems, my challenges, as monsters. Like the storm, the monsters were fantastic beasts, enormous and destructive. Yet over time, I realized I was giving them too much power. I began taunting them with my bravery. Standing up under a tree in my backyard, I watched the water monster crawl towards me, running inside, giggling once it started drooling. I collected the colorful sea glass that floated on the top of the smooth beach it left. I have been facing my monsters head-on since I was young. It is not easy. Sometimes it is downright petrifying. Yet I thrive under pressure, and like the rebuilt awning now embedded in the fresh block of concrete, my scars make me stronger. 2 years ago, I injured myself sprinting down an icy track. The ripped tendon that ensued limited my ability to walk, run, and play field hockey. Without the emotional outlet of athletics, I had to cheer from the sidelines. An incredible challenge for me. The monster won that battle. When I had another injury this year, I decided to face it head on. Although it was hard to accept that yet again I couldn't walk on my beach nor play in the sport I loved, I confronted the monster with fierceness and a determination to heal quickly. These injuries required me to persevere, to abandon the passenger seat of my life for the exhilaration of the driver's seat. I have friends and family who face more serious challenges. My monsters are not insurmountable, nor is their presence significantly life-changing. Every time I confront an obstacle, I grow. I learn from my challenges. I become stronger. I pledge to never let that monster win again. There can be no abandoning beasts. They will always be in my way, always be a part of my path. Wild winds will continue to batter my windshield. Ice will cover my track. Luckily, I have learned to play with my monsters. So that's the college essay that received a 5 score from us. And I'm just going to take my notes and to tell you why this received such a high score from us. So the first point that I want to make is that the grammar. So in this college essay, they use parallel construction, sentence variation. There are a few grammatical mistakes. And I have to say, I copied this from the Common App and it wouldn't let me copy and paste over, so I had to retype it. And so there are typos in here that are my mistake that are not the mistake from the college essay of the writer. So just that, a little disclaimer there about my inability to type grammatically correct. So beyond grammar, the style, I found this style to be completely unique. The personification of the storm, for example, was really powerful. It had a unique opening. The theme of the monster and the transition from the monster as a physical beast to inner demon was very mature for this quality of writing for the student. So that's why I rated, another reason I rated it so highly. The clarity of this piece I also found very sophisticated, and the reason for that is because it was risky. Monsters and inner demons can sometimes be a very abstract concept, and there's not a lot of tangibility that goes along with that. And so this was risky because she didn't have anything to really settle down on as a foundation beyond relying on her voice. So her sophisticated style of writing allowed her to gain buy-in from the reader, and through the powerful sense of urgency in the opening, the transition of the monster concept what really came to fruition well. And then she does use tangible examples in this essay, the one of her playing field hockey, and the actual storm actually played nicely into clarifying points that the author was trying to make about these inner demons. So what are her values? And so teamwork being one of them, self-reliance being another, and how the storm had really challenged her to kind of think creatively and how she could overcome these obstacles that had been put in her path. And then lastly, the flow. So it starts as a story again, but then uses a metaphor as a point of transition. And this point of transition articulates the wider premise and purpose of the narrative overall. So again, those are just some highlights I wanted to mention in the college essay. If you have any specific questions about this, or you want me to kind of give a different example of a college essay, I'm happy to do so. I read so many great ones this year. There are plenty in my toolbox to give out as examples or to kind of talk about points of interest. And I'm also happy to provide advice for how you might outline your essay as well. We're all different levels of writers and work different ways in how to construct an essay. So I want to be supportive in your own process as well, which ultimately leads to my last slide, or one of my last slides, which is the brainstorming ideas and guiding questions. So these are kind of 10 questions I would go over. Most of them are questions that you can ask yourself as you're monitoring and taking a temperature check for how you are thinking about what topic you would like to pursue in your writing experience. So the first one is just, I want to mention that everyone has their own unique story. So you just need to discover which one you want to write about. I think that students who are typically aged in that 18 age range where you're who are traditionally applying to schools now, nobody thinks that they have anything interesting to say. I've given a lot of different workshops on essays, and students, I feel, don't feel like they have anything meaningful to say. So I would say that that is not true. I just think you haven't discovered which one you want to write the most about. So try to give that a shot. So number 2 can kind of help you decide what story, or maybe it's not a story, but it's an idea you have. So what theme do you want to write about? Maybe it's about some sort of like transition that happened in your life, or you want to write about privilege and how that has been afforded to you, or what that has given to you, or how you realize you have privilege maybe at different aspects of your life. Coming of age story, you could write about. So if you think of themes in terms of like movie genres too, that might be helpful in kind of differentiating pathways you can take with this essay. The third question is there a moment in my life that has shaped who I am? Many students might feel that sports, for example, are something that has highlighted them in their life. This student wrote about an injury through field hockey. I've read a lot of different essays about college and athletic injuries or things of that nature, and you can totally write about that. The experience might not be unique to you, but how can you make that story unique? Because if this is a very popular theme, which it is, that a lot of students have embraced in their college essays, which is completely fine, you want to be able to stand out, and you want to be able to make sure that how you're telling it is unique. So instead of maybe talking about how this injury prevented you from being able to play the sport and you had to learn to cope with it and then you grew from that experience, try to talk about it in a different way. Or it's clear that this experience has meant a lot to you, so how has it transformed your experience? I read an essay about a student who had tried out for a team like literally 3 times and didn't make it, and then by his senior year he did, and he talked about like never giving up, and that was his theme, and it was a lot different than the other kind of athletics essays that I had read before. So that kind of gives you an indication of what I mean. And then also the last question, number 3, does this moment shine me in a good light? And this is a great transition for question number 4. Am I writing myself as a protagonist of my own story, or is the way I'm writing the story highlighting another supporting character along my path? So a lot of times I see a trend in college essays where students are writing themselves as supporting characters of their own story. And while the impact of someone else and what someone else has done for you should not be understated in a college essay if that is your experience, I do think that it's a missed opportunity if we learn about the transformative process of one individual and not the transformative process of you as an entity that we're looking at to admit into our college. So just make sure that you are writing yourself as the protagonist of your own story. Number 5 is, how can I grab the reader? What type of introduction would make a powerful parallel to the story that I will tell? I actually was not home when the monster came. My dusty Toyota Camry, Cam, and I were making the windy journey home from work. That is a very powerful beginning, because we think that she's going to be in trouble because there's a storm coming, and also she has a long way to go, and she's in a car that might not necessarily be that reliable. So that really grabbed me personally as a reader, and I thought it was a very unique opening. It wasn't something like using onomatopoeia like bam or wham at the beginning of a story, where some people might do that to kind of like drag the reader in. And it's kind of like this, or using action verbs at the beginning of a story as well. So you can go that's also an option for grabbing the reader at the beginning of a story. But this was just using, one traditional sentence that really grabbed the reader and hooked me in for the rest of her journey home. So very unique opening. When I analyze stories in my English classes, what are things that authors are doing that make them stand out? How do the authors construct their prose to give their work unique meaning in comparison to their peers? So I named this question as an opportunity for you to just explore with your English teacher or explore on your own works that you're currently reading. Obviously, these are published individuals, so their writing is very sophisticated and timeless because you're studying in English class. But what are things that they're doing that make them stand out? Like what are they memorable? Why is their writing so good? And I kind of challenge you to look into that and explore that a little bit more and observe how you might be able to pull some of those things that you notice as good styles of writing into your own college essay. Ultimately, we're not looking for published work here by any means in terms of a college essay, but in terms of quality of writing, that would definitely help a little bit. In my college essay, and I'm giving additional information about myself, a new perspective that hasn't already been mentioned in my college application. Is this essay topic and style of writing consistent with the impression I want to give off to my desired college? So again, this just highlights the importance of personal brand development throughout your whole college application process. So as you're observing what you should write about, if your letter of recommendation is from a teacher or a coach, for example, and the coach decides to write you about how great you are at a sport or kind of like the level of experience and dedication you have for your sport. If you decide to write about that in that college essay, just make sure it's different than the way that the coach might write about it in their letter of recommendation. Because although we're looking for consistency, we're also looking for different perspectives of who you are. So remember that the letter of recommendations are kind of like that second person analysis of who you are, and the essay should be kind of like giving us that level of self-awareness. And so if the coach is describing you as a phenomenal athlete, then we already learned that, and we don't need to, it's kind of a missed opportunity again for giving us a different additional information about who you are within the college essay. And then how does my story end? So knowing that sometimes reality doesn't always give us that closure, that not everything has like a happy ending or a smooth ending or is fully resolved at this point in our lives. But does the resolution in your story tie up loose ends or acknowledge that there's more to the story? Don't leave the reader hanging. Make sure that there is kind of something that comes full circle to how you started. Or so, for example, in the essay that I read, the last sentence is luckily I have learned how to play with my monsters. So she connects the theme of the monsters back to the storm that she was personifying as the monster in the first place. And so that really kind of gave us a full circle feel for what she was aiming for. Does my essay structure have a beginning, middle, end, and does it flow? So again, this is that flow part of the rubric that we're talking about. Are you structuring it like that triangle? With the beginning, middle being the climax perhaps, and then the following action/resolution. And lastly, when I read my essay out loud, does anything sound off? So the second question to this is specifically for like non-native English speakers as well, or excuse me, if English is not your mother tongue. Just a piece of advice or suggestion is that if you are not a native English speaker, maybe you have access to a native English speaker that would be willing to read over your work, if that resource is available to you, to just make sure that it flows and sounds appropriate and whatnot. Again, we evaluate applications holistically, so seeing that English is not your first language on a college application may be taken into consideration when we're evaluating the essay as well. So these are kind of my brainstorming ideas and guiding questions to get you started and to kind of think through as you're evaluating where you might be able to improve on your essay as you are editing it. The last piece that I wanted to kind of go over, although this would be much more helpful in person, is just if you could take a minute or two to kind of like reflect on all the information that you hopefully learned today and are going to come away with. I hope that you're walking away with tangible pieces of information that can contribute to your own writing process. And so if you are thinking and reflecting on this experience that I've taken you through today, what are 2 words that you would use to describe the college writing process as you're coming away with this? As you're writing your essay, but also as you're beginning the college application process in general, reflection is super important. for you to kind of stay grounded in your college decision process, what goals you have for what schools you're looking at, and to kind of just increase your level of self-understanding of what you want your 4 years to look like. So I really encourage reflection, and I think any chance you get, it would really help inform your process overall. So in terms of the essay, what are 2 words you would use to describe your college writing process now that you've seen this presentation? The second one is kind of will enhance those like metacognitive abilities to kind of like think through, really troubleshoot different areas if you're getting stressed about the college process, specifically about writing. And what are some actionable steps you could do to start building a strong essay? Or if this seems completely overwhelming and your goal is to write a completed college essay, how can you break those down in more actionable steps? Maybe it's coming up with a theme over the course of a week. And then after that, maybe it's fleshing out some stories in your life that connect to this theme. And then after that, maybe it's kind of like building 3 different outlines for 3 different topics that you have. So create these actionable steps and create goals for yourself so that you can feel accomplished along the way. This can be a huge undertaking for some people where writing is really a struggle, and for other people it can be a really exciting opportunity. It really runs the gamut. But again, I'm here to support you if you ever need anything in terms of constructing your essay. The third piece is, what did you learn about yourself as you begin reflecting on your own experiences? So like I said before, writing the college essay will kind of give us insight into who you are. It gives us a level of self-awareness. And so as you're going through this process, inevitably reflecting on your own experiences will help you kind of bring that into and center that more in your college essay as well. And lastly, did we meet the learning objectives? So our learning objectives were understanding why a strong college essay is important. So I hope you kind of gained that from this talk today. Distinguishing a strong college essay. So, we use the rubric and we use SAT scores, maybe if they're submitted, all to build uniformity around how we're aware that essay writing and evaluation can be subjective sometimes. And so how do we measure that? We analyzed parts of a college essay. So I read you an example of a great college essay and we walked through that together, certain parts that I walked away with, and maybe there was something else that stood out to you, which kind of supports that subjectivity mindset as well. And then we kind of used the guiding questions to evaluate potential subjects that might be topics for a solid essay by using that guided framework. So I hope that was helpful and that you did walk away with some of these things. Again, if there's anything that I can do, I'll leave my contact information here. My email is lbuzan@smcbt.edu. And that's all I have. So again, if you have any questions, I really hope that you'll take advantage of me and reach out. I'm more than happy to talk about this with you and flesh things out, maybe do a workshop. If there's a group of you in the same area, I'm always happy to help. This is a very strong passion of mine. So thank you for your time and for listening to me. And I hope to hear from you soon. Good luck with your college writing. Thank you. Bye.